us for another episode of Mercy Speaks Gold with Chantina. And today we have a special treat for you all today. And so, Mercy, would you like to do the honors?
Yes, it is my privilege and my honor to introduce Professor Atticus Taylor. Y'all are in for an amazing treat, like Shantina said. Professor Atticus, he's an ordained minister in the AME Church. He's a distinguished professor, and he currently teaches ethics, philosophy, and religious studies at Edward Waters. He's also a retired chaplain in the United States Navy. And that is not even the beginning of the things that he has accomplished. When I looked through his bio, I was inspired and honored to have him come on the show just to have a conversation with us. So before we get to our topic, we have a couple of icebreaker questions.
Oh,
So the first one, I know you said you were going down home to Alabama. You're originally
yes.
from Alabama.
Yeah.
And I know when I go home, either to Nigeria or to St. Louis, there are some things I look forward to. And one of those things is the food. Like
Huh.
when I go to St. Louis, Emo's Pizza, Church's, not Church's Chicken, White Castle.
White Castle.
Yes, and the Chinaman. Like you cannot go to St. Louis and not have Chinaman. So
Absolutely.
Chinese food. So what are you looking forward to going home to Alabama?
Whew. Well, definitely
Yeah.
the food, the family, the fun. Um, all of my siblings and their children can cook. The boys, the girls, everybody can cook. So, and being the youngest of my clan and the only male member of the family, which means I'm the only male uncle for all of those nieces and nephews. I expect to have quite a few things served up to me, so I'll have to discriminate, between, not offending anybody and sampling a little bit of everything. But aside from some of the barbecue, that's common to that area. Aside from the greens and the cornbread and the only place outside of home that we will go to eat will probably be this place called Trowbridge's Ice Cream, a place that I frequented as a kid. And when my sisters were dating, the guys would come to the house and try to, win my favor because, I could give them a secret ballot. And so guys would offer me McDonald's. They would offer me, toys and candy. But only the guys who knew, I don't know how they found out, but who could break the code to get offer me Trowbridge's ice cream. That was the one that I gave the thumbs up to, and he was allowed to come back. So yeah, looking forward to that. It's a place that is tricked out like the '60s. They got all big chrome seats with the red leather covering. They still use the little plastic letters and numbers on the menu board, and it's just takes you back all the way back in time. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that.
So tip number one, if you're trying to get a girl, getting good with her younger brother.
Yes, yes, yes. That was what they used to try to do. They figured they get to me, then yeah.
Okay, our next icebreaker question, our show is called Mercy Speak. And
Mhm.
we have shared it's not just because my name is Mercy, but about the attribute of mercy. So when you think of the word mercy, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and I think sometimes people confuse mercy and grace, right? So grace is recognizing the fact that you're granted something that you don't deserve. Okay. And mercy is when something is withheld that you do deserve. so, uh, so that's where those two can sometimes get confused because mercy is that demonstration of the divine, and even in the case of parents with their children, of withholding a certain level of severity for a deserved punishment or a deserved outcome. So mercy is that you could say it's like divine self-control. Yeah. So.
Love that.
Mhm.
Divine self-control.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Okay, yeah. I love that you said divine self-control and withholding something in terms of outcome. Because when I think of the word mercy, one of the things I often think about is disrupting an outcome.
Mm.
Like when mercy enters
Mhm.
enters the chat, like we say,
Mhm.
the outcome changes.
Exactly. Mhm.
The ending of the story, it changes. So I love that. We were chatting about a week or so ago, I think, and we ended up talking about the different elements that makes up the universe and planets. Y'all, I get on the phone with Professor Atticus, and it's like an hour, and we're like, oh my goodness.
Oh, gee, dude, we should go eat. Oh, are you hungry? Is your family still there? You know, yeah, it's
Because I just love
pretty easy.
that you get me to think in a way that is divergent and to think in about an idea or a topic or a concept in a way that I haven't always thought about it.
Mhm.
You bring in the religious aspect of the conversation, but then you introduce the practicality of that information with a philosophical view, which is mind blowing to me. You read and write biblical Greek, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so getting those type of insight into scriptures that I normally read or ideas that we've kind of formed in a lazy way without really digging deep into it for me is really exciting when I talk to you. So we're talking about the elements that made up the world, and I'm like, oh, speaking of elements, what do you think of gold?
Mhm.
Right. And so we started a conversation, and I'm like, you have to talk about that when we come up here. So
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
share with us your thoughts on qualities of gold.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I'm grateful to both of you amazing ladies for inviting me to be a part of this ministry, this work that you do, this tremendous outreach that you're involved in. And that I understand that I'm your first sort of formal guest. So, you know how the firsts are, whether you're,
Edit this confetti in there.
yeah, first teacher, first love, you know, you know, first show, first car, all those things are
Yeah.
great. And the expectation is pretty high. So I definitely, I may not appear to be feeling any pressure, but a little bit because you can only go up from here. so, so anyway, I'm thrilled to be here, and I just wanted to share that. But yeah, as Mercy was saying, and she didn't, she didn't overshare, but as she was saying, we encountered each other. It appeared randomly at the dealership. We were at this dealership. We won't say anything because we don't give them any business. But anyway, uh, we we were at this dealership getting our car serviced, and while we were waiting, things were taking a little longer than expected. And so I happened to see this graceful, classy, amazing woman of color, kind of pass by. I'm sitting there, watching the TV, hardly paying attention to it, but wondering what's going on with my car. What are they doing? And so then, she was in a little room, like the little business center where you have your computers and stuff hooked up. So I just kind of, she was to my back. So I just kind of said, well, I'm not going to, come off as being, rude or anything. So when she came out another time and she was serving coffee to, making coffee, I said, I think I'll have a cup of coffee because I think I'm going to be here a while. So I got up, I talked to her, introduced myself, and we just started talking about what we do and where we're from. Found out she was formerly in the Navy. I'd been in the Navy, and Navy folk, military people, whether it's Navy, Air Force, Army, we all kind of hook up whenever we see each other. We try to honor the uniform. So that's kind of how it kicked off. And I discovered this brilliant young woman was pursuing a sense of God's directing in her life. I won't go so far to describe it as what we typically call a calling, but that's how it sensed and felt. And so I told her that day, I said, I don't think this was random. I think this was a divine appointment. So that's how we got here, and we've been. I don't know how long ago was that. 2 years? Yeah, it's been a while. I don't 2 3 years. I don't know, but we kind of stay in touch, through phone calls and what have you. So the the thought of the different things that make up the earth is, you know, it can be complex, but there's a certain amount of simplicity about it. For example, when we're talking about gold in particular, and I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even thought about it that much, but most of us don't realize that in Genesis 2, it's the first precious metal reference. So we're talking about first tonight. So gold is the first precious metal to be mentioned at creation. I mean, so the idea is that we were formed from the dust of the ground, and we know that gold can be, in the form of dust, bullion, and other types of forms. It could be nuggets. It could be actual, whole, like chunks of gold. So it's literally all over the earth. And so it's been there since creation. It's like, man, this stuff must be important. But it doesn't stop there. The text goes on to say in Genesis 2, and the gold was good. Wow. Because nothing else had been described as good except each thing that was created at each day of creation. God looked at it and said, behold, it is good. When he made this, made that, behold, it is good. But the gold is referred to as good. And I mean, I don't know how many, fans we have here of the OJs or whoever, the whole money, 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 money thing. It's supposed to be the root of all evil. And since we know that coinage, which creates currency, can be used as money or a means of exchange. So gold being called good right at the onset of creation, that's potent. That's potent. And it says more than maybe we can talk about tonight. But then it goes on to say in Genesis 13 that part of Abraham's wealth, now he's the founder of every major religion on the planet. Part of Abraham's wealth was gold. They said he was very wealthy. But mentioned in that was gold. So we know that gold is a way in which one's status can be defined. It in and of itself, as an essential element, is good, according to Genesis. But those who possess it, it increases their value as well. All right. So, and it goes on to say that, in Exodus 25, you have the Ark of the Covenant that's created, and it's overlaid with gold. All of it is covered in gold. And then when they create the tent of meeting or the tabernacle, every piece of furniture in there is made of gold. It's like, get out of here. Then when Solomon ultimately builds the temple, the real thing, the building, the structure, the altar, the utensils. I mean, can you imagine that going into church today and everything's made of gold? I mean, I don't know. Eh, There might be a lot of robberies going on in worship services if that was happening. But the cheap acrylic stuff that you see in there and the plastic and all the junk you see in church buildings nowadays is like, but there was a time this mindset was honored, that especially the place which is considered the dwelling place of God is supposed to have the best. And since gold had been there since the founding of the world, it should be in the mix, right? So why we consider it such a valuable commodity is because we have to recognize the fact that it represents not only a great value and something that can give one status, but it also represents a measurement of one's endurance. Now, how do we know that? Well, we look in Job 23, and Job said, after I've been tried, I shall come forth as gold. He didn't say silver, he didn't say diamonds. because he wants to be representative of the good stuff that was around since the creation of the world. He wants to be connected with that. But what he's trying to say is that my trials and my testing is representative of an element or a metal that knows how to restore itself after its shape has been disfigured. So it doesn't matter what you do to gold.
Right.
you know, you know. And so when we talk about resilience, and that was part of what we were connecting with this topic tonight, resilience is an engineering term, comes from the world of engineering that talks about how any body or structure or object restores itself to its original state after being under pressure. Okay, like a bridge, or maybe the frame of our car. When it goes through some kind of pressure, can it restore itself? The chassis is built with a certain kind of metallic structure to restore itself under certain types of impact. Well, gold, when it is associated with heat, and if it's high enough, it will melt. It will lose its solid status. Okay. So we recognize the fact that our nature, our being, our makeup, if it was on the ground at creation and we were created from the dust of the earth, my goodness, could I have a little bit of gold? I can't see it, but could I have a little bit of gold in me? And so we have to think about that. And when we say, well, where would you find the highest concentrations? Well, we shouldn't be surprised.
Right.
And we shouldn't be surprised.
No.
It's not China.
No, it's not.
They got a lot. It's not Asia. They got a lot. It's Africa. In particular, South Africa in Johannesburg. That is considered the biggest gold discoveries on planet Earth, okay, of all time. So when we think about the dust of the earth, when we think about that which we are formed from, and how that dust is moving around us all the time, we're breathing it in. It's part of what we are and what we're made of. We have to think of the fact that we possess tremendous value, but we're also really resilient. We have the capacity to regain our original shape after undergoing intense pressure. Okay. And what I love about what Job said is that his hope and his confidence beyond the suffering will be like pure gold. Now that is different from just regular gold. Pure gold is originally mined. It has not gone through any type of processing. Originally mined. Now, what is the thing about it too that really captivates us? The word also in the Hebrew refers to the shine, the shimmer, the glow. Okay, so it is sometimes even used to refer to the color of different types of oils, like olive oil. Okay, a quality type of olive oil is generally going to be gold, all right? But what's the biggest thing in creation that we can look upon every day and see this brilliant gold reflection? What do we call it? The sun. Okay. So I know that some of you probably watched some Indiana Jones or McKenna's Gold or King Solomon's Mines or something. You've watched some of these shows, and when they go into when they bust through the temple or they dig into this cave or something, whether there's anybody shining a light or not, the gold is brilliant, shining, glowing, just casting off a beautiful reflection. And so that's the other part about what gold represents. And I'll say this and then pause to let these ladies speak some more. But I remember I was in Saudi Arabia and I was with a group of Marines and they were gold shopping for their families because that's what you do when you go to the Middle East. You go around and you go to all these different shops. And we were in some place called, I don't know, Dammam or somewhere. I can't hardly pronounce it, but we were in some part of Saudi Arabia and it was becoming late in the day and the sun was just setting. So they have asphalt sidewalks around all of their gold shops, and their gold shops are on both sides of the street. And they're just windows filled with all types of gold, 24 karat, you name it, it's in there. Chains, bracelets, necklaces, earrings, whatever. And they're just big windows all around on both sides of the street where their asphalt has a sandy substance in it that causes it to glitter when light is reflected upon it. And so you got these lit up windows of the gold shops, and then the asphalt is reflecting it back. And I stopped the guys and I said, now I see what they mean by the streets are paved with gold. And they just stopped and looked and they were, wow. So, I mean, but that's how much light gold can reflect. That's how brilliant it is when light is cast upon it. So, that is one of its benefits. And then finally, what were the gifts that they brought? The baby Messiah: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And of course, the gold was representative of his kingship and his messiahship because his kingship was going
Mm.
and his messiahship shall have no end. It will endure forever. So makes all the sense in the world to talk about gold.
Yeah. I could sit here and just listen to this. She said, and we're just talking about just gold. Just one element, just one topic. And gold is precious. It's persistent. It's always been there from the beginning. It was the very first thing that was called out specifically as good. Like, yeah, day one, and it was good. And it was good. It was a categorical good. But with gold, it was like specifically called out as good. My business name is Bedellium LLC from that specific scripture that you referenced, and our colors are black, white, and gold because it says that there was onyx, which is black,
Right.
and there was bdellium, which is the color of coriander seed, which is supposed to be a milky white, and then there was gold, and the gold was good. And so I love that you brought that up. So when I think about when you said even in us as some element of gold. It has to be if we were made from the earth, and the earth is abundant in all of this element.
Right.
So when I think about us as human beings, and you talked about resilience, nature of gold, and how gold has that ability after going through fire and sometimes being melted down to come back and to restore its shape. What are some ways for our viewers and even for us, as we go through the fires of life? He said, you will go through the fire, I'll be with you, but you're going to go through some things. Like, how can we just tap into that inner quality of the fact that we are golden? It's in our very nature to be resilient as creatures of God, as people who come from a continent where the most golden is the hydrogen. Like how do we reach that place in us to
I,
pull that out?
I think often the metaphor that's used to describe our makeup is clay, right? So, and we think of clay as something that obviously it can be destroyed and then it can be restored because it goes through a similar process that we just described for gold. It can be broken into many pieces, ground up into dust, and then it can be resoftened and remolded into something else, right? But it is so easily breakable. For indeed, we do carry this treasure in earthen vessels. But what kind of treasure would you typically carry? Likely gold, right? So what we have to make the transition with is understanding. Yes, we're like the clay, and we chip and we break and we crack. but we also like the gold.
Mhm.
So sometimes we bend, but we don't break.
Okay.
Sometimes we might be a bowl, but we might need to become a cup.
Mhm.
Sometimes we might be a pitcher crafted out of gold by a goldsmith, but then we might need to be a dish or a platter that serves a larger you know community. So I think that when we look at those comparisons between clay and gold, is that by adopting our gold essence, we understand that unlike the clay, gold is not so easily destroyed.
Mm.
It can be changed in its shape, but it never loses its consistency. Whereas clay, it can be ground up, it can be blown away. Different things can happen to it, and so we're both of those things, but we're also the gold.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
So much.
So now we've come to one of our exciting part of our
Uh-oh.
show. We call it the shady topics.
Uh-oh.
And what we do in this segment of the show is we throw shade at
Oh.
habits that keeps us and prevents us from moving forward. All right. So
What we do for the
today's about imposter syndrome because we've been talking about gold, so I think it does make sense to really talk about overcoming that imposter syndrome of clay, right?
right.
I, if I think about that analogy, that you know imposter syndrome, that mindset or thought of the fact that we're only clay when in actual reality we're really cold and really cold. So it's a quick fire segment. We just kind of go in and introduce the topic, and then we give like one or two or three tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome. So, all righty, Chantina, you ready?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
We
You
were
good?
actually just doing it. Yeah.
Okay. Wait. That was so good. Very good. No, that segment was so good. We got to I can finish.
We do. We definitely.
Whew. All right. Okay. All
So
right.
now it's time for shady topics.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. Now it's time for shady
Shady
topic.
topics.
Shady topic.
Woohoo.
Today, our shady topic is imposter syndrome, overcoming imposter syndrome, that voice at the back of our head that tells us when we're at the table that we don't belong there. And so it's about silencing those voices. So I'm going to turn it over to our guest today to share a couple of tips on how to overcome imposter syndromes.
Wow. That's a pretty tall order. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is one of the continuous challenges, you know, people who have come out of oppression experience because we've been renamed and we've been told we're someone different than who we really are. So sometimes that desire to fit in uh, leaves us with that sense that um, if I'm gonna cope and if I'm going to not be the target of somebody's negativity or discrimination in a more harsh way, maybe I can just be something other than my true self. And so it originates ultimately just from the naming of our ancestors, especially those of the diaspora. We were given names of people that don't have nothing to do with who we really are. And so having to try and live up to whatever that was or supposed to be has made it sometimes more convenient for people to wear the mask. And so I think it's important to appreciate the fact that uh, what that does is it robs us of the true place, position, and purpose that we've been created for. And I think that one of the better ways to get over that is to learn as much as one can about your ancestry.
Yeah.
And that's what I spend a lot of time doing. Mercy and I talk about this all the time. And the more I learn about my ancestors, it's like, okay, so that's why this is important to me. And even though people around me thought I should be dismissive of it, like deeper knowledge or reading and studying and preparing myself. A lot of people around you think, oh, you just want to be to know it all. You just want to be somebody that wants to impress people. No, that's in my DNA. And so I think the biggest cure for overcoming the imposter syndrome is to connect as much with one's DNA as possible.
Right.
And your DNA, it, it, it's not going to it's not going to change. I mean, you can do a lot of things externally to try to present it in a different fashion to try to gain acceptance, but your DNA is purposeful. It's by design, and it is resilient, and it is persistent, and it is forceful. And what's interesting about it is it will skip a generation to accomplish its goal. If you had imposters before you continuing to, hide behind the mask and pretend, to be a doppelganger, to be an AI of themselves, uh, what you end up discovering is that sometimes it'll skip a generation to then allow whatever that true representative of that line of purpose and power and precision to come forth. So those are things that it's really just it's a self-inflicted wound to continue to hover there, but it's understandable why some people do. And the first thing is to understand that you can find sources of compassion for many of us who have come to terms with that, who've come to terms with accepting that we can't be that. And I remember when I first went into ministry, people used to say to me, "Oh, you sound like your pastor. You preach like him. You even talk like him in some ways." And I said, "Yeah, because as a mentor, he had a tremendous impact on me. But as I grew into who I am, I kind of like me better." And so that whole thing of being able to like yourself, not saying those that you tried to imitate or emulate were not likable. They're just not you. And so once you get to that place where you can appreciate who you are, uh, it's not easy. It's going to take some time, but understand that there are compassionate souls who are available to help you walk that path.
I love
I
that.
love it.
And I just sum that up with to thine own self be true,
Mm-hmm.
but you must know yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you don't know yourself, then you can't be true. You can't be true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the best ways of doing that is by learning about your heritage,
Mm-hmm.
learning about your ancestry, learning about what great people
Yeah.
you come from.
Yeah.
And that in itself is empowering to let you know that
Yeah.
you didn't just sprout out of whatever it is that you sprouted out
Right.
of, but that
Right.
you come from a long line of people who have accomplished great things.
Mhm.
Well, that brings us to the end of our show. But before we go, we have a little gift here
Oh.
for our very first guest.
Oh.
Professor Atticus, thank you so much for the honor and for coming on here and sharing with us on
Oh.
the show.
Ooh.
The little
I
show.
love this. I love this.
Yeah.
I'm going to put this on top of every place I can that it make it visible. This, the whole Walter Cronkite thing comes to mind, or back in the day with the old radio show.
All right.
Oh, thank you.
Episode. Remember to stay golden. All right. Bye, y'all.